A very good morning to all present, especially to all the conference delegates, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome everyone. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And a very good morning to all. Selamat datang and thank you for joining the 12th World Class Sustainable Cities International Conference 2021. In short, WCSC 2021. WCSC 2021 is entitled Low Carbon Society from Blueprint to Implementation is co-organized by the Real Estate Housing Developers Association, REDA, Malaysian Institute of Planners, MIP, and Malaysian Institute of Architects, supported and endorsed by Dewan Bandaraya, Kuala Lumpur, and University Malaya. I'm Nur Azira Najwa, and it is my pleasure to be your Master of Ceremony. The first keynote presentation this morning is David Sim. Mr. David Sim is an architect, planner, former creative director of GAIL, author of Soft City, Building Density for Everyday Life. With some 20 translations to date, the book Soft City has established David Sim as a thought leader in urban livability and sustainability planning. A well-respected practitioner, David Sim has an impressive portfolio of master plan, urban strategies, and design work across the globe, from the highland of Scotland to the lakes of the Patagonia, and from the suburb of Melbourne to downtown Tokyo. Based in Sweden, David Sim now works as a senior urban expert for GAIL as well as on his own, making cities, towns, and villages softer. Please help me in welcoming Mr. David Sim.
Hello, my name is David Sim. I wish so much I was with you in Kuala Lumpur today. I'm sorry to miss this important event, but at the same time, I'm so glad that it's happening. So I want to present to you something about the idea of a soft city. And that might sound like an oxymoron because you think of the city as a hard place, but the soft city can be a place which helps us solve some of the big problems we're facing in society. So what is a soft city? A place where people can get connected to planet, to place, and to other people. This is Malmö in Sweden. And who would imagine that people will dance tango on a spring evening in a public space? And that's just a sign when you get things right, people behave perhaps in surprising ways. People connected outside with other people, very much feeling they're part of a place. This is part of a housing exhibition, 20 years old, built on a brownfield site in Malmö, where the contemporary architecture is maybe the buildings are much closer to each other than we're used to. Smaller, more intimate public spaces, and a scale which works very well at eye level. It's a scale of opening the door, saying hello to people passing by. It's the scale of opening your window and speaking to strangers. And it's a scale, that human scale also promotes trust, so that your children could maybe go outside and meet strangers, sell juice or sell coffee to strangers on the street. Or maybe going out on a Tuesday evening is taking a pizza down to the waterfront, sitting in the public space and being part of a wider community outside, kind of connected to place. And of course, this is Scandinavia, so they're Vikings, so they even jump into the sea. This was never planned, this was the harbor. But what's extremely soft is when in the neighborhood, people walk around in their dressing gowns in the mornings or the evenings, and you meet your neighbor in their dressing gown going for their swim. And even more surprising is when they go for their swim, they leave the door open. They leave the door open so the cat can come inside and outside. And it's as if they were living in a little village in the countryside and not in the middle of a big city. And I suppose in this way, you could say that neighborhood is not just a place, it's a state of mind, it's a way of being. And you think, oh, how cute, Swedish people dancing tango and walking around in their dressing gowns. How is this in any way relevant to some of the challenges Malaysia is facing in terms of making sustainable places. And we know, because in Sweden we've got Greta, and she's reminding us of all these important climate challenges. We're seeing incredible floods in Scandinavia, which are, coming year by year. We're also seeing a pandemic, not just of COVID, but of heart disease, obesity, and diseases which are related to lifestyle. And also we're seeing a pandemic of loneliness, that although people are in cities, they're actually feeling very, very isolated. We're seeing, of course, challenges of inequity. And of course, everybody's stuck in traffic as cities are becoming so congested. And urbanization is one of the biggest challenges we're facing. How can we do urbanization in a way that makes sense and is kind to human beings? And it seems hard with all those threats of the climate change, the threats of urbanization, the people stuck in traffic, congestion, inequity. How can we solve things? But it's all about relationships, people to place, people to people, people to planet. Can we improve those relationships? And can it be an opportunity to connect people, to make people enjoy the place they're living in, people to live with the weather, to be connected to the nature of their place, and also to be connected by mobility, that physical mobility could also be about social mobility. And coming back to this idea, I think we have to think about neighborhood as relationships. And this guy sitting on the edge of a building, this is Espen, who gave a lecture yesterday. He's sitting on the edge between inside and outside. The doors are open. It's a cafe which is connected to a place, to the street, to the square. It's connecting people to people, and of course people to the planet, because you're inside and outside. Very simple things that keeps you connected. And in this way, these places like Malmö, can be places of connectivity, where different people meet different people, where people spend time outdoors in different weathers, and people feel connected to these places. And in this way, I think we can see the city as a solution. And there's this picture I found in this old picture of Paris, and this was supposed to be a picture of the bad old days, where you see this building with the layers, with the rich merchant or the family on the first floor, and the second floor, the middle-class family, the poor people under the roof. And of course, it's talking about poverty. But in old Paris, all those different people lived in the same building. They used the same stair, and outside, they used the same streets, and they had access to all the assets of the city. Today, those poor people in the attic, they live like 20 kilometers away in another suburb. So can we find a way to kind of allow people to live together? And I've kind of created this kind of little equation that density times diversity makes proximity, that making high buildings, dense buildings, fat buildings isn't enough. Without diversity, it's not interesting. But density and diversity gives you closeness. It gives you the likelihood of being close to useful things. And then the city makes sense. And so from this point of view, we need to think about a greater diversity of building stock. We need different kinds of spaces, streets and squares, backyards and gardens, ground floors and top floors, basements and penthouses. We need greater diversity in the building stock. And that's kind of the basis for Soft City and what we're trying to do with Soft City, to bring together all those things, public and private, busy and quiet, working, living, leisure, all those things in one place to allow us to live locally. And this idea of living locally, perhaps the most important thing since the pandemic, we've discovered it's incredibly important that everything you can do is close to where you live. You can talk about the 15-minute city, but we can also talk about the 1 minute, the 3 minute, and the 5 minute city, and how that helps you in your everyday life. Simple things about the juxtaposition of different kinds of buildings, this pattern of cities, which we've been doing all over the planet for thousands of years, just mixing different buildings next to each other, and the value of enclosure. One of the simplest things in architecture, to create a protected space, that a courtyard creates protected airspace, creates protection, privacy. It allows so many things to happen. In Copenhagen, we discovered that this backyard, the courtyard, didn't need to just be a place for air conditioning units and dumpsters and parking cars. It could become a common garden, a shared space in the middle of the city, kind of a safe, this yellow is the kind of the common zone, that the different buildings can share an inner world, a common space where your kids can run out and play safely, where they've always got a playmate because there's somebody outside. And looking down, you've got hundreds of parents watching into the courtyard. You can be cooking dinner. You can see your kids. The distance, the height is low enough. You can shout out. You can tell them to do something. You can shout them in again. Maybe it takes the kids 45 seconds to run outside and play. And they've got a traffic safe play place in there, just behind their apartment, connected to their apartment. It's also a protected climatic space. Because as a protected acoustic space, because free from the street, is quiet. You can sleep with an open window. You don't get the noise of the traffic. And of course, it's a protected climatic space as well. So things grow, plants can grow that they wouldn't grow outside. It's more protected. You can hang your washing out. The good microclimate also makes it's a little bit cooler in the summer. It's a little bit warmer in the winter. That's important for us in the north. And what we're seeing now is all over Scandinavia, we're building courtyards. We're returning to this traditional building form because it performs so well and gives us so much. And these are just some of the courtyards in Copenhagen and Malmö, which are kind of responding to that need. And I think maybe the most interesting thing for connection and connecting people is the courtyard can also give a common identity. And this is what it means, that you can come downstairs, have a meal, meet your neighbors in this shared space. It's not public, it's shared between the different neighbors. And this, I think, is one of the important parts of, if we want to start making a more cohesive society, is having places like this. And of course, also, when we think about how to live locally, how to build densely and diversely, the value of layering, and just the difference between stacking and layering. The words sound similar, but stacking is like pancakes, the same thing on top of each other. But with layering, we accentuate the difference. The ground floor is different from the top, is different from the middle. And in every building we make, we really make the most of this layering. The layering that speaks to the street and the yard, the protected spaces of the middle floors and the upper floors which speak to the sky. Even the basement, which is well connected to the public realm of the street. And just making the most of those things allows us to deliver a greater diversity of activity in the same place, on the same address. Different people might live in different parts of this building. And in this way, we can accommodate diversity in the urban environment. What we've discovered is that the ground floor is always the most valuable, whether it's for shops and businesses, public services, but also when it can be a home. Very often people don't want to live on the ground floor. But what we've discovered, that if we make a little front garden, a little edge zone, have some steps and stairs, that the ground floor can be extremely attractive. And now in Scandinavia, we're discovering that people want to live on the ground floor because it feels like you're living in a little house. Your own front door, your own little back garden, your kids can run in and out. So we're discovering that people will pay 25% more to live on the ground floor if you take care of this edge with a front door and garden. And in the same way, when we build in this low dense way, we can get more penthouse as well. It's not just one odd building that gets the penthouse. The whole top becomes a great penthouse. And this, of course, creates value and amenity. And so this is a kind of layered building, speaking to the street, the middle, it's shops and restaurants on the ground floor, offices in the middle floors, and then residential on the top. And this is a way of delivering great diversity and density in the same place, which promotes living locally. And of course, you can do other amazing things with the roof as well. This is our rooftop garden and restaurant in Copenhagen, where you can eat the food that's grown locally. And this scale, and I think this is something that when I look at the landscape of Malaysia and Kuala Lumpur, we have these little houses, very expensive houses, villas, and with these very tall apartments. And recognizing there's this missing middle. There's this other scale, which is extremely attractive and interesting for living well connected to each other in place. Second big theme about the book, getting about and getting on. So physical mobility is also about social mobility. And I guess time must be the most democratic thing, because no matter how rich you are, how well educated you are, you've only got 24 hours. If you're lucky, you get 8 hours sleep. If you're lucky, you only work 8 hours. So you've got 8 hours left for everything else. And if a big chunk of your own time is eaten up by travel, of course you lose, you never get that time back. And this golden part, your time, the time where you take care of yourself, when you read stories to your children, when you spend time with your family and your friends, doing the things that you're passionate about. This time, if we can make, by reducing travel time, and we give you more of these few hours a day extra, we can improve your life enormously. And so this idea of the 15-minute city that everybody's talking about, again, breaking it down into 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minutes, recognizing how your home connects with the street and transportation. And this idea that mobility, it starts at your apartment door. And those simple things, it takes you 10 seconds to walk in and out from the street. It takes you maybe 15 seconds to walk from the street through the building to the courtyard. And maybe it takes you 45 seconds to walk up to your apartment. So this idea that mobility is also in the buildings. And the simple things you can do. And this is when I get very excited. This is a picture from Copenhagen. And you can wonder, what's all the fuss about? And what you see here is the pavement, the sidewalk is continuing across the side street. And that means that when the car comes, it has to stop, and the pedestrian has the right of way. And of course, this gives dignity to the pedestrian, but this also turns the street into a time machine, because what happens is that you don't have to stop on every side street. You get to keep walking. And this means that your 5-minute walk becomes a 3-minute walk, because you don't need to keep stopping all the time. It also means your children could walk to school on their own, because they don't have to cross the street. They can walk 10 blocks and they don't have to cross the street. And that's a real time machine, because if your kids can walk to school, apart from the fun they can have and the freedom they can have, it also means that you can have more time for yourself. And for city life, this is again a gift of time, a simple detail which changes the priority between cars and people and changes the dynamic of how we move around the city. Simple things. Copenhagen and many cities in the north of Europe have used the cycling as a form of transportation. Everybody can cycle. You can see the grandmother, grandfather, the children, everybody cycling. And a very simple system of having a curb separated, grade separated. So there's a curb between the pavement, the sidewalk, and the bike track. There's a curb between the cars and the bicycles. You always go in the same direction. So it's always, you go instinctively with the traffic. And because you've got pedestrians on one side, that feels very safe. You've got the parked cars on the others, that also makes you feel very safe. And remember, for those of you in Malaysia, this is continental Europe, so it's the other way around. So I guess this would be on the right-hand side in Malaysia. But this is also allows you to move differently, and you can spontaneously stop, when you're cycling, because you're in the same airspace, you're at eye level with people. You can say hello to your friends, but you can even smell the bakery. So if you go around in European cities, you'll see the bicycles spontaneously stopped at the bakery or the shops, because it's easy to stop. You are connected. You're connected to people and place. You're connected to commerce. And in this way, it all fits together, that these thoughtful small details allows coexistence in the city, the symbiotic relationship, that the pedestrian, the cyclist, the cars are more comfortable because the cyclists are out of the way. Driving is easier when the cyclists stay in their own territory. And again, everybody can, even the shopkeepers can be part of this harmonious ecosystem. And in Copenhagen, people cycle in the summer, but even in the winter. 70% cycle every day because it's convenient and easy. And again, if we think about moving around the city, public transport, if we think about it as part of the public realm, the seamless movement from window shopping, buying a coffee, buying your ticket, and just getting on the bus, this ease of waiting in the street. It feels much safer to wait in the street than inside a station, perhaps underground. It's more spontaneous. You can be drinking your coffee, or in Hamburg, it might be your beer, waiting for the bus to come. And you're part of city life until the very last second when the bus comes. And of course, for these old ladies in Japan, it's a safe, comfortable social space easy to get on and off, and much saving a lot of time going down underground. Also, it's instinctive to negotiate. This is trams in Basel, in Switzerland. And the predictability of the tram line means people know exactly where they can walk, and they can easily negotiate moving through the transport. And of course, this eye level gives you a connection with people like, the driver, and also just moving at eye level connects you with the city. As you walk, as you move on the bus or on the tram, as you move through the city at eye level, you see faces and people, you see the leaves and the trees, you see what's going on in the shops, you see what the weather's like. And this is also about connectivity. It's a way of moving through the city that you're constantly connected to where you are. And of course, public transport is also a place where you can meet, where you can engage with people. And of course, different people meet. And it's a little moment on the tram in Germany where 3 people from 3 different cultures meet. And of course, there's nothing more delightful from this German grandmother than seeing these different little these little young children, little babies. And this is how we can meet in public spaces. So public transport is also a public space. And in this nice, easy atmosphere of being up there amongst the light, it's also a place to engage with strangers. And so I think when we talk about transportation, I know there's so much talk about TOD, and that every time we have a bus stop or a metro stop, we should build a tower. But the problem with this system is it only really connects people to other places. So your apartment, your elevator connects you to somewhere else. This doesn't connect you to where you are. So I have this idea of neighborhood-oriented transit, that we think about the neighborhood first, the values that start at your front door, about how you go in and out, how you walk along the street, engaging with your neighbors, spending time outdoors, and that we have to build a transportation system which supports neighborhood life and how we are connected to people, place, and planet. Something like this is Helsinki with the tram, bus, bike lanes, people walking through a relatively dense urban environment, but still with the trees. And the trees is a good link for the final theme of Soft City. It's about connecting people to planet. And I call this living with the weather. In the north of Europe, it's cold and wet. In Malaysia, it's hot and humid. Can we learn to live with the weather? And obviously, for thousands of years, before cars, before air conditioning, we lived comfortably with the climates we had. We dressed appropriately. We lived appropriately. We took siestas when we had to. We took shade from the rain, protection from the rain. We took shade from the sun. So we've always had this knowledge and ability. And again, if we look at old cities, we know that the courtyard, the way of laying out buildings to get protection from the wind, to capture the sun or protection from the sun. We know there are many, many old techniques for living with the weather. Now, in the cold countries, and this is in Sweden, we have cold winds. And this is an example. It's a wall. It's just a stone wall. But the stone wall creates a microclimatic room, a space where you can change the temperature. And so you can be outside in winter and enjoy the sunshine, even if the wind is blowing very, very cold. And this is the same thing, something similar here. This is the sunny corner of a square in Lund in Sweden. And you can see they've made the public chairs like sun loungers, so you can really enjoy the sun. But what's fantastic is even when there's snow on the ground, people can sit here because they can enjoy the sunshine on a very cold day. Now, other places, we're seeing that the weather's becoming too hot, and we have a kind of a process we call Mediterraneization, when the Mediterranean climate is spreading further north. And so, for example, here, this is in Bern in Switzerland, a former building, industrial building, has been opened up. They've opened up the walls to make an outdoor space, a cool outdoor space, so you can be outside on a hot, sunny day when it's too hot to be in the sun. They've used plants to cool it down. And this is another way of adapting. And there are so many simple ways, simple measures we can do to cool down the place. This is Bern, the arcades. And we've got a whole range of, some people want to be in the sunshine. Some people want to be semi in the sunshine. Some people want to be under the parasol. Some people want to be deep inside, like the cave of the arcade. and people are different. And this is also a kind of softness that in one cafe, there are all these different experiences of climate. So you can find the one that's just right for you. And I think if we design our buildings to maximize ventilation, to create shade and shelter, we can use this very simple techniques. We don't need to rely on technology. And again, this is the softness of finding simple ways to get protection from the rain without losing light. These shutters, I think shutters are one of the most intelligent forms of architecture. This is in Barcelona, and you can have the different shutters. You can louver them. It's both for acoustic, light, and air protection. You can control all of those things totally instinctively, and you don't need any technology. You just do this yourself. And so I think simple technologies can be hugely helpful. And also the spaces which connect us to the outdoors, the arcades, the back gardens, the decks, the balconies, the bay windows, the French windows, the loggias, the roof terraces, and these very simple additions to existing buildings. This is in Copenhagen, a cheap addition, a microclimatic space which can be adjusted. This is in France. You can see the louvered screens. So this is a space which can work in different seasons. Simple technologies which allow us to live better in our buildings and allow us to be better connected to the forces of nature. Another one, this one in Paris, using plants, the cooling qualities that plants give us to help cool down a place. And finally, yes, this is back in Copenhagen. I talked about the floods which come there every year. How did they solve that? Copenhagen was faced with a huge challenge. Should they spend billions and billions of kroner creating big concrete pipes under the city to deal with the flood water when they have these cloudbursts 2 or 3 times a year? Instead, rather than building something underground that nobody would see, they converted street space and car parks into green space. They created green, soft landscaping, which was floodable. And the idea was that during heavy rainstorms, they can collect the rainwater locally and allow it to filter very slowly. And a few days a year, you've got this poetic reminder of climate change. But what's importantly, 360 days of the year, you've got beautiful public spaces which the public can enjoy. So this is a cheaper solution, but it's a much more smarter solution because it allows people to be better connected to the outdoor spaces. And rather than burying the technology, the pipes underground, you explain climate change through public space. And this is just an example of the climate quarter in Copenhagen. Of course, it improves the amenity for people living there. It absorbs heat, it reduces the heat island effect as well. And finally, what my goodness was this? This is in Bern in Switzerland, people walking around in their swimming costumes in public. And this is because they've learned to swim in the local river. Swimming in the local river, where it's cool in the summer, if it's 38 degrees and hot, you can jump in the river. So the bankers and watchmakers of Bern can just get in. And it's simply because they've got some concrete steps and a bright red handle so you can find the handle. And it's a simple way of learning to have swimming in the city. This is in Copenhagen. This is the harbour bath, a simple wooden platform which allows people to swim in the city. It means for poor families that can't afford to go on holiday, they can have their holiday locally. It means for local children, they can swim every day. The season gets longer every year because people learn to get used to swimming in the unheated water. And of course, it's very soft. Can there be a softer way of meeting your neighbor wearing your swimming costume? A softer way of spending time, being connected to nature, and really feeling like, wow, I live in a city with water and I can swim in the water when I feel like it. And this connectivity is really about people, place, and planet. You put it all together, density, diversity can actually make for delight. We can make places that are lovely to spend time, but also connect us to the forces of nature, allow us to be less reliant on cars, less reliant on air conditioning, living outside, living outdoors together, and in a more cohesive kind of society. And this dream, as we build densely, as we think about urbanization, if we have a more human approach, we can maybe deliver the same density, but in a form which brings people much closer to each other with a much stronger sense of identity in place and a much better connection to to the planet. And around the world, we're seeing this new scale of architecture, a new scale using simple solutions, simple technologies, a scale which allows people to live connected and close to each other. Like in Malmo, where people dance tango. But is any of this relevant to Malaysia? You're thinking, oh, this is so cute, swimming in Copenhagen, dancing tango. Well, when I look in Malaysia, I know that you have an amazing tradition of vernacular architecture, Chinese merchants' houses, which have amazing microclimatic potential. You can be in these spaces, there's no air conditioning, and the climate's fantastic. So there are ways of building in Malaysia which don't need air conditioning. And even for me, when I surf the internet, I can see there are this new interpretations of traditional architecture. At the same time, I know you've got traffic challenges. And I can see there's this whole mapping project to map cycling Kuala Lumpur. And then just looking on the internet, there are some amazing heroes of urban cycling. And what's fantastic when I see these images, all kinds of different people cycling. And I'm especially happy to see the mom with her children cycling around Kuala Lumpur. And this shows it's possible. It shows there's an appetite for different ways of moving around the city. Also, there's the cycling mapping project. And finally, in those long corridors with the electrical pylons, there's some fantastic groups. Here, the community at Hartamas, the community gardening in those corridors, communities choosing to work together, spend time together in the outdoors. So I think the interpretation of soft city in Malaysia may be very different from Copenhagen or Bern, but I still think there's an appetite for a soft city in Malaysia. I think you can find ways to connect people to planet, place, and other people, and the city can be this platform. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope I can come to Kuala Lumpur and to Malaysia very soon and continue this conversation about how we make softer cities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. David Sim, for the presentation. Now, it is with great pleasure to cordially invite the Vice-Chancellor of University Malaya, Yang Berbahagia Professor Dato' Engineer Dr. Muhammad Hamdi Abdul Syukur, to deliver his keynote presentation on low carbon and green campus initiative in University Malaya. Yang Berbahagia Professor Dato' Engineer holds a Bachelor of Engineering Mechanical degree from the Imperial College London, England, a Master of Science degree in Advanced Manufacturing and Management Technology from the University of Manchester Institute of Science and Technology, United Kingdom, and a Doctor of Engineering degree from Kyoto University, Japan. His astounding academic excellence as well as his remarkable leadership quality have made him a natural fit to helm University Kebangsaan Malaysia as its Vice-Chancellor in 2019. And in November 2020, he assumed the role of leading University Malaya as the 13th Vice-Chancellor. Please welcome Yang Berbahagia Professor Dato' Engineer Dr. Muhammad Hamdi.
Assalamualaikum and very good day. Honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me a great pleasure to wish everyone a warm welcome to the International Conference on World-Class Sustainable Cities 2021 WCSC. I would like to congratulate the organizers of this conference, Real Estate and Housing Developer Association of Federal Territory Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, Institute of Planners and Malaysian Institute of Architects, PAM, with its strategic partner Kuala Lumpur City Hall for making this conference happen. I am very pleased to learn that this conference has brought together built environment professionals, city managers, residents group associations, and various city stakeholders with the aim of discussing the current trends and challenges of becoming world-class cities. Low carbon society, from blueprint to implementation. The chosen theme for WCSC this year shows the commitment of the built environment professionals, particularly the town planners and architects, in promoting agenda towards sustainable development. Therefore, it is a great pleasure for me to share Universiti Malaya's journey in promoting low carbon initiatives and becoming an exemplary green campus. Let me start by focusing on the specific issue of carbon emission. And we all know that major industrial cities have been known to be among the major culprits when it comes to issue of carbon emissions. Likewise, climate change has certainly impacted many cities in the world too, and Kuala Lumpur is not spared either. We all know this, as we have heard, read and seen the frequent incidences of flash floods and landslides in Kuala Lumpur and the Klang Valley in general. And here in Universiti Malaya, we're set right in the middle of the city and faces the same challenges when it comes to flooding, fallen trees due to soil erosion, and the traffic congestion that greet us as soon as we drive out of our gates. This is because in fact represents Kuala Lumpur in microcosm, like a small city or community within a big city. With a steady increase in the number of campus population year by year, the university management constantly need to strategize the future physical development to cater to the needs of the growing campus community, as well as managing issues related to spatial planning, asset management, traffic circulation, to mention a few. However, I truly believe in this symbiotic relationship between Universiti Malaya and Kuala Lumpur by sharing mutual benefits as well as common woes and struggles. At this juncture, I applaud the Kuala Lumpur City Hall for making a proactive action by providing frameworks in guiding the urbanization of the city in sustainable manners. This can be seen from the blueprints such as Kuala Lumpur Structure Plan 2040, Kuala Lumpur Climate Action Plan 2050, and Kuala Lumpur Low Carbon Society Blueprint 2030. All these plans indicate a clear commitment of Kuala Lumpur in becoming a world-class sustainable city and a city for all, as mentioned in the Kuala Lumpur Structure Plan 2040. As a part of this ecosystem, Universiti Malaya must live up to these expectations and visions of Kuala Lumpur. Apart from aspiring to be a global university impacting the world, we realize that we have an obligation to Kuala Lumpur and the citizen of the world. We have to play our parts as a hub in promoting sustainability agenda and nurturing young minds of our future built environment players, which include the town planners, architects, and city managers, to be sensitive towards the global issues, especially with regards to climate change. And we are proud to be a part of the international and national movement in combating climate change through the establishment of various low carbon initiatives and green campus strategies, which I will further elaborate in my presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, let me share some facts and figures about The campus community is made up of close to 28,000 students and 5,000 academic and administration staff. is also home to more than 4,000 international students. The existence of international community within our campus contributes to the diversity of culture in the campus. is also supported by 25 Center of Responsibilities ranging from various disciplines, built environment, medicine, science and technology, and social sciences, and hosts the biggest teaching university in the country, Universiti Malaya Medical Center. Being the oldest university in Malaysia, we are also blessed with heritage buildings and sites, as shown on the right side of the slides. From the top is Dewan Tunku Chancellor, an iconic landmark located in the middle of the sprawling campus of UM. It is one of the few first buildings in Malaysia that has the influence from the legendary Swiss architect Le Corbusier. The old Chancellery building and Panggung Experiment are the other two heritage buildings that signify the glory of this premier institution. Apart from heritage buildings, we are also proud of our natural heritage, a botanical garden called Rimba Ilmu, which means Forest of Knowledge. It is a 700,000 meter squared green lung of Kuala Lumpur, and it houses more than 1,700 plant species, and the forest is also used for both conservation and education. It has a strong conservation function with a herbarium containing over 70,000 accessions, perhaps the second most extensive in the country after FIMS. It plays an important role in environmental education, as there are visiting school, students groups coming all the time. As the country's oldest university, the planning and design of the campus and buildings reflected the trend of the built environment of the past. Low-density development sprawling across campus may not fit with the recent trend and emphasis of the sustainability agenda. We have a large stock of old buildings that have been in existence for more than 100 years, and they were constructed with little consideration on green and sustainable features. So the challenge for us is to manage the existing infrastructure while pursuing green agenda and initiatives. We acknowledge the fact that being an educational establishment with teaching and learning as our main activities poses some challenges for pursuing sustainable development agenda. As large organizations, it is hard to deny that universities and other educational institutions do have significant emissions which contribute to the climate crisis. Toxic chemicals used in laboratories, insecticides and pesticides are abundant on many campuses. Chemicals depleting the ozone layer, causing increased human exposure to ultraviolet radiation, are common in cooling and refrigeration systems that can be found on campus, such as libraries, lecture halls, and cafeteria. The extensive travel of staff and students also contribute to the emission. We know that university-based scientists contribute to understanding of greenhouse gases and development of renewable energy, but at the same time, they are also implicated in development of the science and technology that is enabling continuing exploitation and usage of fossil fuels. Universities do have extraordinary potential for contributing to sustainable development and addressing the root causes of climate change. Yet, that contribution is not guaranteed and requires close understanding of the institution and its complex interactions with society and the environment. With these background issues, realizes that we need to have a strong commitment and will to create a systemic change that can move the whole university in a sustainable manner. At University Malaya, we have set our sight to become a carbon neutral campus by 2030 with strategic intervention of holistic participation from top management and campus community. This visionary journey is aligned with Kuala Lumpur Low Carbon Society Blueprint that aims to reduce 70% of carbon emissions by the year 2030. In developing our low carbon commitment, we acknowledge that the impact of our carbon emissions and our role in defining our future, recognizing the need for the skill, knowledge and creativity of all staff and students to develop low carbon solutions. To develop an operational model for the institution that is in harmony with our academic endeavor, it needs synergistic approach from 4 angles through education, governance, resources, and practice. In terms of education, we realize that we have this responsibility of imparting knowledge and awareness in students on environmental issues. However, this itself can be a challenge as climate science involves interdisciplinary fields and may be difficult to be embedded in the subject-based or professional-based programs. To overcome this, starting from this year's intake, all students are required to take elective courses under the cluster called Global Issues and Community Sustainability. This is to allow students to take courses outside their discipline and learn about real-world issues related to sustainability. The university management constantly reflect on how we can use research to shape the future development of the world, particularly in promoting sustainability. Through Interdisciplinary Impact-Oriented Research Grant, IIRG, and Living Labs that I will elaborate further in this presentation, we have started seeing tangible impacts on the research projects. In the ecosystem we are working in, we can no longer afford to compartmentalize ourselves and working in silo. We need to have shared vision, clear strategic plans, and blueprints to ensure that the vision is shared, well received, and understood by the whole community, not only lecturers and students, but also cleaners and general workers. Through our own experience, we realize that our efforts are enhanced considerably by having input and feedback from individuals and organizations from inside and outside the campus community. These help to create and nurture partnership in the promotion and practice of sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, our journey in becoming a green campus started way back in 2008 with the establishment of CAS, which stands for the Community and Sustainability Center. And from this name, we can highlight 2 key words which can explain CAS role. Throughout the journey from 2008 until now, received various awards and recognitions for the effort in promoting sustainability agenda. In 2015, received the Green Era Award. In 2017, has been showcased as the only 2 participating Malaysian universities in Low Carbon Cities Framework, LCCF, since 2013, with 1 diamond rating recognition of Best Practice 1, i.e. carbon reduction level between 1 to 9%, at the International Green Tech and Eco Product Exhibition and Conference, Malaysia, IGEM, Kuala Lumpur Convention Centre. In the same year, 2017, won Top Prize Platinum KL Mayor's Tourism Award under the project Education Tourism, Campus Sustainability. We were also appointed as official trainer for Green Volunteers for SEA Games and ASEAN Para Games 2017. In 2019, under its Water Warriors project, emerged as SDG 14 Champion and River of Life Special Award from Petaling Jaya City Council. In the 2020 UI Green Metric World Rankings, is ranked 32nd as the world's most sustainable university. This is an increase from previous ranking of 34th and 36th in 2019 and 2018, respectively. I'm also pleased to report that is ranked as the 5th most sustainable university in the Asian region. is also regarded as having one of the best water and waste management systems in Malaysia. We received a perfect score in the Water Management Initiative, a 95.8% in the education and research initiative, and 87.5% in the waste management initiative. Throughout this journey, does not do its work alone, but taps the expertise and voluntary interests of many others within and outside We work closely with a comprehensive network of NGOs, private organizations, and businesses who have community interests and sustainability at heart. The commitment of in achieving the vision of reducing carbon by 2030 is outlined in Eco Campus Blueprint. This document serves as guidelines used by community to achieve a sustainable and green campus. The blueprint places an emphasis on 8 core areas. Number 1, landscape and biodiversity management. Number 2, waste management. Number 3, water management. Number 4, energy management. Number 5, transportation system management. Number 6, green procurement. Number 7, education management, environment and climate change. And number 8, change management in governance, participation and communication. All 8 core areas have been identified as requiring commitment and a holistic approach spanning disciplinary expertise and responsibility centers, which includes top management at academic and non-academic staff and students. Living Lab, on the other hand, serves as a knowledge or action research platform for the Department of Development and Estate Management, JPPHB, as the process owner in waste management, water management, energy management, and greening and biodiversity to gradually improve the sustainability of their operations. With this approach, researchers join hands with JPPHB staff and other relevant stakeholders in to systematically improve performance in these areas according to specific targets or KPIs. And this approach is more focused, systematic, collaborative, and transdisciplinary in nature as compared to other research grants. All in all, it is a one-step experiment which combines 2 main components, namely research and sustainable campus transformation plan. Living Lab is introduced to support the aspirations of to be among the leading eco-campus while promoting participations of the entire campus. Through translational research of Living Labs, our researchers can contribute to the realization of Eco Campus Blueprint and subsequently address sustainability issues within campus. I will just share here some of the projects conducted under Living Lab grants. We have these slope eco-engineering techniques that are able to reduce soil erosion and increasing soil carbon storage and green surface. We also have projects on carbon storage mapping through real-time GPS tracking and IoT monitoring that can reduce global energy use while absorbing and fixing carbon dioxide from the source or atmosphere. We also had Zero Waste Campaign in 2010, and this Zero Waste Campaign project has contributed significantly in environmental protection with the diversion of a total of 1,141,190 kilograms of different waste from disposal to landfill with its recycling and on-site treatment in The types of waste collected are food waste and green waste for in-house composting and anaerobic digestion, use, clothes for reuse and recycling, materials recyclable for reprocessing as secondary materials, and e-waste for recycling. In terms of capacity building, the ZWC has trained over 12,000 people from a variety of local and international organizations. Every year, approximately 60 to 70 delegates visit the ZWC Center, with each delegate bringing between 10 to 50 people. These visitors come to ZWC to gain knowledge in biological treatment methods such as composting and anaerobic digestion, as well as separate collection and integrated waste management on campus. Through this ZWC project, we managed to turn waste into wealth. The monthly reduction of approximately 6 to 7 pools of open-top bin hauled to landfill has resulted in a total savings of more than 390,000 ringgit in waste disposal costs since the program's inception. In addition, proceeds from the sale of used clothing on the campus, total 38,000 ringgit, was donated to a variety of charitable organizations. More than 100,000 ringgit has been generated as income for the university as a result of ZWC's expansion of the circular economy approach through organic farming and capacity building trainings. All of these adds up to a total monetary gain for the university from this initiative of 490,958 ringgit since 2010. Under the flagship of Water Warriors, we managed to save quite an amount of water through installation of Mr. Timble rainforest harvesting system, an IoT water monitoring system equivalent to more than 300,000 ringgit bill saved. We also have the smart management of electrical appliances and energy saving using IoT. Through this project, we managed to save more than 2 million ringgit on our electricity usage, and we hope to expand this further throughout the campus. At this juncture, let me tell all of the audiences that all of these projects and Living Lab initiatives has successfully addressed the 3 pillars of sustainable development: environmental sustainability, societal well-being, and economic performance. These can be seen from the reduction of carbon emission and the monetary gain that we benefit from the projects. As you can see on the slide, through Living Lab projects, we managed to divert 17,630,000 kilogram carbon sequestered from 2015 to 2020, and this equals to 291,515 trees, seedlings grown for 10 years. So this is just to show the total monetary gain that we benefit from total direct income and indirect savings from Living Lab initiatives. These slides basically summarizes the achievements that we have gained through Living Labs. The most significant achievement would be the human capital development. The graduates produced through Living Lab grants have gained significant knowledge, skills, and experiences in sustainable development, and this definitely will create a ripple effect that benefit humankind. Ladies and gentlemen, at the beginning of my presentation, I mentioned about having symbiotic relationship with Kuala Lumpur, and that being a microcosm of Kuala Lumpur. As a higher educational institution, we have a considerable expertise and capacity in fields related to sustainable development. As such, we can provide valuable input and information to local authorities in the implementation of initiatives aimed at enhancing long-term sustainability. We realize that we might be lacking experience or connections to community, in particular the grassroots level, where sustainable issues were very often acutely felt. Therefore, we are proposing here to create a partnership either with the local agencies such as Kuala Lumpur City Hall, as well as business and other non-governmental organizations to create a more consolidated approach in pursuing sustainable development agenda. We believe that such arrangement will bring a good cross-section of participation and representatives in transforming our society. We would like to suggest that through our research centers such as Sustainable Urban Planning and Real Estate, SUPRI, Center for Building, Construction and Tropical Architecture, BUCTA, and Center for Transportation Research, CTR, to name a few, to be partners and members of the Kuala Lumpur Urban Observatory, which has been initiated by Kuala Lumpur City Hall. This partnership will benefit both parties, and through this institutional setup, it will ensure a regular involvement in the practice of sustainable development. As a take-home message to everyone, we all know that the major root cause of climate change is human. Hence, we need a human solution, one that involves changes in human understanding and action. The first thing that we need to realize is that sustainability is not an option, and it is everyone's responsibility. By having a commitment towards low carbon, we must reassess all our activities so that they are not contributing to environmental degradation. I have mentioned about the importance of strategic partnership, as everyone has to play an active role, as we are all global citizens. Whatever we do, no matter how small, would have an implication toward the environment. Before I end my presentation, I would like to stress that our low carbon commitment embodies our pledge to creating a world-class university that is both dynamic and engaging place to study and work within an efficient and sustainable environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yang Berbahagia Professor, for the presentation. We will now go into our next sub-theme, Urban Environment and Greenery. The first paper is entitled Sustainable Master Planning, will be presented by a phenomenally successful and experienced speaker, Dr. Andy Bow from Foster and Partners.
Hello, I'm Andy.
Dr. Andy Bow is a senior partner and a deputy head of studio at Foster and Partners. He studied architecture at Mackintosh School of Architecture, Glasgow. Dr. Andy joined Foster and Partners in 1996 and has worked on a wide range of projects in over 30 countries. Dr. Andy is passionate about sustainable city planning and has led the replanning of Trafalgar Square, the redesign of Old Port in Marseille, the Sesto Master Plan in Milan, and the Foster Partners building on the new High Street of the Battersea Power Station Master Plan in London. He is an ARB registered architect and became a Fellow of the Royal Incorporation of Architects in Scotland in 2011. In June 2014, he was awarded an honorary doctorate from the University of Glasgow for his lifelong contribution to architecture and education. Please welcome Dr. Andy Bow.
Hello, I'm Andy Bow. I'm a senior partner at Foster & Partners, and I'm happy to join you from our London office. I'm sorry that I can't be with you. Hopefully next time. And I'd like to present some thoughts on city planning. And I begin with a film about the work of our practice. And firstly, there are some words from our chairman and our founder, Norman Foster, where Norman talks about how we continue to learn the lessons from the past as we look towards the future, with a firm belief that good design can make a difference. From the early days of our practice, you will start to see that we make life incredibly difficult for ourselves by never doing the same things twice. There is no rule book here. If there was, it might say that we think it important that there is a clear expression of structure, that we love natural light in our projects. Equally, we design climate appropriate. So here you can see shading in buildings in the south of France. We design everything from door handles all the way to whole metro systems for city. This is Bilbao, and buildings that breathe, the Commerce Bank. We've designed everything from governmental buildings, the Reichstag in Berlin, the Botanic Gardens in Wales, the Great Court of the British Museum. We do master plans, the work at Trafalgar Square, the university buildings in California, and culture buildings, this time in Gateshead. We've also designed the highest bridge in the world, to quiet places to study in Berlin. A building that needs no introduction, is right, to the Hearst Tower in New York. And we designed Wembley Stadium. We designed many master plans. This is Masdar in Abu Dhabi and the Dallas Opera House. City Hall in Buenos Aires. A children's hospital in Ireland. Again, we love the clear expression of structure, whether it's stainless steel or timber or breathless glass in an Apple store in China, or handmade bricks in China. No building's the same. Everyone is different. And we have great interest. And we even have a project on him. The same love here into the design. Whether we're imagining or lamp, table, everything about quality of detail and car, boat, plane. We designed all that for one of the problems. And as you know, we are a firm of architects, but we're also so much more. We're master planners and urban designers. And that's really what I'm going to talk about today to your conference on city planning. I could have spoken about many buildings, but I'd like to talk about infrastructure. And there are many different facets to infrastructure, how we move around the planet, and the new changes in mobility, and also the changes in how we live and how we work, and how that's going to impact on the subject of infrastructure. The reason why I talk about infrastructure is that we have a global perspective. When I was born, there were 3 billion people on Earth. If I live another 20 years, there might be 9 billion people on Earth. 3 times as many people on Earth since the day I was born. And this has a profound impact on everything we do in our practice. And when we design, we really do think globally, and we always start with the climate analysis. There is an enormous difference between designing for the intense heat of the Middle East, or in places like Malaysia and Singapore, where you deal with not just intense heat, but also heat and humidity. And you can see from this diagram where we are in London, dealing with the northern climate, where everything changes with the 4 seasons. And this is what we call climate appropriate design. And that's really the theme of what I'm going to describe today. So I begin with how one responds to intense heat, imagining that in some ways the sun is almost your enemy as a designer, the architecture of shade. And I begin with a very important project. This project is Masdar. It was designed in Abu Dhabi maybe 15 years ago. And I think it's extremely interesting because, as Norman said at the beginning, in order to look to the future, we have to learn the lessons from the past. And what we did with this project was we looked very, very carefully at the DNA of the historic city. And what we found in cities in this part of the world was that the streets were very narrow, and that happened for good reason. But of course, the dilemma is how then do you start to move around a city in greater numbers when you have very, very narrow space between buildings? Everything here is done very thoughtfully, very analytically. And so the first thing we did was we went and measured temperatures. And we found that the space between the buildings were often still 46 degrees and the shaded spaces 35 degrees. And the buildings themselves were designed to combat the heat of the sun with dense thermal mass and screens, veils that were on the edge of the building as a first line of defense against the sun. And you can see that the desert itself measured 66 degrees centigrade, quite extraordinary temperature. And even more interesting when we started to study the city centres, that the temperatures were even higher. So radiant heat coming from the roads, the tarmac that's black, and from the reflected heat from the buildings up to 71 degrees. So this is about lessons learned in Masdar and how we created these narrow streets and how we had buildings that had screens, that had veils like the traditional vernacular architecture, and everything was designed with a specific climate in mind. One of our ideas was to try and create a space, a courtyard, that was a bit wider than the traditional streets, but it was important to find a way to begin to cool the space. You could see the temperatures that used to arise here. So the idea of a tower as a dehumidifier. So water goes to the top of the tower. Water is heavier than air. And as it comes down, it evaporates and it creates cools. And then in the early evening, children come out to play. And the answer to the point I made at the beginning of how do you then move around this new development with narrow streets, the answer lay below. And the answer lay in personal mobility through electric vehicles travelling underneath this master plan. Masdar was also important because we worked with many of the world's great universities to see what could be done to harness the energy of the sun. And there were many lessons learned. 15 years on, when we begin master plans in the Middle East, they start with the same philosophy of neighborhoods, of areas that are grouped together, and again, looking at harnessing the energy of the sun, but also looking how to harness water that may be available. And going back to the point I made at the beginning, with the rising population of the world, how are we going to feed everybody? So many areas of research in hydroponics and biophilia. Masdar was a very important project, and from that we started to grow enormously the urban design and city planning group within Foster & Partners, to the extent now that we're building all around the world. On this slide, there are master plans in India, in Greece, in Sweden, in Australia, and many other countries. And we're now at a stage where we're designing over 130 million square meters of accommodation around the world. It's a very, very important part of the work of our practice. And again, wherever we are designing, we always recognize the importance of climate analysis. So staying with dealing with intense heat, this is another project. This is the airport in Amman in Jordan. Very similar to Stansted Airport in London, which was modular, which allowed it to extend over time. Stansted has been extended twice in its lifetime already, and now I believe there are plans in Amman to do the same. But the difference is the idea that when we began this project, we were almost drawing these concrete palm trees, but they were solid. They had density to cut out the high angle sun. Climate appropriate design. And another example in the region, this time in Dubai. And it's a building that really stands out from the crowd, not through the shape that it has. It stands out because it's at a different angle to every other building. And the reason for that angle is the angle of the sun as it rises in the morning and sets in the late afternoon, the evening. And the cores are placed on the side of the building as the first line of protection, a bit like the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank. What's also important is, because here the sun is really right above your head, that there is horizontal shading all the way down. And you can see in the middle image the idea that you should create an anticipation of entering into somewhere cooler with the movement of water, creating coolth as you enter. It's an interesting phenomenon that I often talk to students about. How when you come up against such extreme climates, it's such a great challenge, but it's also, every challenge is an opportunity. And you can see in these slides the beauty of the cast shadows that really form the architecture from the screens that are on the outside of the building. And then the importance of threshold, moving from a beautiful green courtyard into a building through a series of layers, shaded, and then screen layers. And a theme that repeats in the Apple Store in Dubai with some beautiful screens. You can see they're quite tall. You can see the height of people. So maybe the screens are 5-6 meters high, but they're made of carbon fiber that makes them very easy to move. And it just allows the building to track the path of the sun and close down. It's almost like the building is closing its eyes. But a very beautiful thing, tailor-made for Dubai. This project I find very interesting. This is a building we did for the Emirates, and it was a small pavilion that was designed for an expo in Milan. And often what happens with expos, at the end, the buildings are simply demolished. But in this case, you can see some vertical lines. The concept of this building was that it could be reused, which is an increasingly important subject in the 21st century. So this little pavilion was designed, and the curves that you can see were actually created to form shade, with the knowledge that in Milan, the building would be in one orientation, and then it would be moved to Abu Dhabi and rest in a different orientation, but the curves that were generated would provide shade in either location. And I think it's a very interesting project from the point of reuse and allowing people to have that first line of protection from the sun, in this case, perhaps when they were queuing to go and see an exhibition. Overall, if I have a general theme in this talk as well, it is that city planning is not really about square meters or square feet or net to gross or any of these things. It's always about people. Whether it's Norman's idea that people could sit on the building in Nîmes, and rest a while. You know, as a tourist, when you're moving around, it can often be hot. So you could rest on the building yourself. Or the same idea in Hong Kong, you can see the middle image on the left-hand side, where you can sit on the building on a grand terrace watching the sun go down in Hong Kong. And a similar idea in London at the Scoop, which is next to City Hall. The idea that there can be evening cinema and it's a nice place for people to rest. But always in all of these images, some architects often do photographs of their work and they don't have people in them. But for us, it's the opposite. It's all about people. And that's an important thing as a designer, always leaving a city better than you find it. Now I'd like to talk about heat and humidity, where you are in Malaysia. And this is an interesting project. This is the Petronas University, and it's in the northern part of Malaysia. There's a series of very simple buildings, and they're almost designed around a university quadrangle. And what's clever about this building, I think, is that the complex of buildings is crowned by a very, very large canopy. And that serves a number of different purposes. First of all, it gives the university a sense of grandeur, a scale. But environmentally, what it does is it captures the rain. I've been coming to Malaysia for the last 30 years, and I'm conscious that at certain times in the afternoon, there is often very, very heavy rain. And you can tell when it's coming because the guys on the mopeds turn their jackets back to front and hide under the flyovers. And it's very, very intense. And then it cuts off very quickly. It's like a shower that's been turned off. And then gradually people come out again. And then you see the heat rising from the tarmac. And unless you've actually experienced that as a designer, unless you've actually seen it, it's hard to imagine when you're a student on the other side of the planet how you should be catering for that in terms of design. So the way it's dealt with here in Malaysia is to gather water on the roof. The water is gathered, they come down the pipes, and it feeds the landscape. And then the final contribution that the canopy makes, it has a sense of grandeur, it gathers water, but it also creates breezeways, which are very, very important in your part of the world. And this then, an idea that we took further in Singapore, a project called South Beach. It's opposite Raffles Hotel. And originally there was a thought about a kind of shopping mall that would be air conditioned. But what we wanted to try and create was something that was more subtropical. And in this case, the curves that you see were generated to harness the wind and to create breezeways. And then this little film will illustrate. We see the trees. Different orientation where the wind comes. And again, we have business is also anchored for the wind. We managed to keep the existing buildings, and you can see how they can divide it up. Whenever the roof sees the sun, there are photovoltaics. So the idea of trying to create a subtropical experience, if you've been traveling for 13, 14 hours from London and you're going to stay in the hotel, then as soon as you get out of your taxi, you've perhaps been in an air-conditioned taxi in London, moved through an air-conditioned airport, you've been in an air-conditioned plane for 14 hours to get in another air-conditioned taxi. And then that moment when you step out the taxi that you know you're somewhere wonderful, you're in Singapore. That for us is a very important thing. And if you get it right, you can tell 5 o'clock on a Friday evening, people in shirt sleeves relaxing, the historic buildings have been retained, you know you're in Singapore, and you're surrounded by beautiful landscape. Climate appropriate design. So now, how we move. Well, this of course is a very important subject, and perhaps if the last 2 years has taught us anything, it's to think more carefully about all the decisions we make, including how we're going to move in the future, how often we're going to get on planes and trains and so on and so forth. But imagining that people are going to continue to travel and move around cities, how can we make that experience better? I joined the office on May the 1st, 1996, and I'm very proud that on May the 1st, 2021, it was my 25th anniversary in the office. And the first project I worked on was the pedestrianisation of Trafalgar Square. We removed some of the traffic from the north side. We introduced 2 small holes in the wall. There are some public toilets, you can go, there's a little cafe, small architectural interventions, but interventions that would have a profound impact on London. Because at the time of this study, we started to explore with all the other parties how to make London less polluted. So the northern side of Trafalgar Square 25 years ago looked like this, diesel-laden buses and cars. And it really wasn't a very pleasant place to be. Some photographs from that time, really the only thing to do in Trafalgar Square was feed pigeons, and the people really weren't important. They were all kind of hemmed in, they were treated like cattle. And the cyclists were really the enemy. You can see the sign in the middle, all pedal cycles left in the area will be removed by the police. And it was the start of working with Professor Tim Stoner, originally Professor Bill Hillier at Space Syntax, University College London, and we were starting to look at pedestrian movement in cities, that some studies that they had instigated. And the little image on the bottom right is just showing that red are tourists and yellow are Londoners. So Londoners really weren't going there, and as pedestrians were crossing to navigate around central London, it really wasn't very pleasant, and it often wasn't very safe. So something had to change, and change it did, and we made lots of intervention. But the good thing is that those interventions, when we started talking about cycle lanes, a congestion charge for central London, ideas that we were making it more difficult to drive through the centre of London, in the hope that people would take public transport or change their journey time, or they might not travel at all, but they'd think about how important it was to come into the city in different ways, maybe staggering their times, as I say. And all of those ideas, 25 years on, have extended and extended and extended. So the cycle lanes continue to extend, the congestion charge continues to extend, and particularly during COVID, it was a reminder of how London could be a better place when the planes stopped flying and the trains stopped running and the cars stopped moving. It just smelt and felt fresher. More and more people were cycling, walking to the local shops, and like many other cities over the last few years, London has become more of a 15-minute walking city rather than something that was very centralized before. And perhaps that's a sort of model for the future of other cities in the future. So that small project, at the same time, I'm enormously lucky to work on the United Bridge, a bridge Cathedral to the Tate Modern. Very important project because it was it was about people moving around the city in new ways. And it was the only time that you would cross the Thames without the noise of traffic or trains. And that was a very, very important experience. 21 years on, we did a study recently with space syntax again. 21 years on, we thought originally maybe 2 or 3 million people a year would cross the bridge. But in 2019, the study showed that over 7 million people were crossing the bridge per annum. And so if you do the maths, 7 times 21, it might be fair to say that up to 100 million people might have crossed the bridge since it was opened. And that's very interesting because visitor numbers to St. Paul's have more than doubled, and the Tate Modern is now an incredibly important cultural attraction in the United Kingdom, in the City of London. And that's led to further urban regeneration all the way around the South Bank and future prosperity for Bankside. So it's very, very important how infrastructure can make such a powerful contribution to not only the spirit of cities, but adding value to cities through really pleasant ways to move around the cities that we have. The bridge, as I said, was the time when you crossed the Thames without the noise of traffic or trains, and it was designed to encourage people to slow down, to stop a while, and to float above the skyline of the city. A very minimal structure. And I think that in many ways, of all the things I've worked on here over the last 25 years, it's still the one I'm most proud of. These philosophies of people-centric design continue today, and I was also very lucky to be involved in this one, which embodies many of the ideas that I've just described in Trafalgar Square and the Millennium Bridge. This is the old port of Marseille. This was a competition that we won. When we went there, we found that the streets were very, very similar. The areas were fenced off, and in many ways, people weren't important. They were really designed by highways engineers. You can see from this image a picture of the existing fabric of the city. And there's the existing fabric of the city, sorry. And you can see how the cars were really like a giant wound that dissected the city from its lifeblood, which was the water. And there was very little space for pedestrians. And the photograph I showed you a moment ago is down at the bottom. And we changed all of that. So we increased the number of pedestrian crossings. We slowed the traffic down, as we have done in London, to make a much more pedestrian-friendly place. And the yacht owners' facilities were moved onto individual pontoons on the water to free up some more space. And the good we created a single quality canopy, a mirror-like canopy. And now people have come and they believe this project and the canopy itself is because we noticed that the water, the sun was reflecting off the water onto the building in front of us. So this is a celebration of the light of the sun. And there is no artificial light in the canopy. Really, it does everything. Beautiful thing at sunset, amazing thing at night. And you can see in the end how this canopy has become a focal point for the new regenerated Old Port of Marseille. So I'm extremely grateful to be given the opportunity to talk to your conference. Again, I'm very sad that I can't be there in person, but hopefully next time. And I leave you with some images from our projects that just illustrate how important inclusive design is for everybody of all ages and for all future generations. So with that, I send you my very, very best wishes from London, and I look forward to my next visit to Malaysia, a country that's very, very important to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Andibo, for the informative presentation. If participants have any question, please raise in the Q&A box below and will be addressed during the panel discussion after the next paper presentation. Moving on, the second paper presentation this morning will feature the Deputy Secretary General of CityNet, Dr. Aiza Tobing, with her presentation entitled Planning and Design of the City for Climate Mitigation. Dr. Aiza is a city planner who holds a bachelor degree in city planning from Bandung Institute of Technology, 2 master's degree in city planning and international development and appropriate technology from the University of Pennsylvania, USA, and a doctorate degree in environment from the University of Indonesia. She is currently serving as the Secretary General of the Jakarta Research Council and the Deputy Secretary General of CityNet, the regional network of local authorities for the management of human settlements. She is also involved in several international organizations, including the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy and the C4 Climate Leadership Group. Please welcome Dr. Aiza Tobing to deliver the presentation.
Thank you, Azira. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Very good morning, distinguished guests, organizing, and all participants. Thank you for joining us and giving me the opportunity to be able to share about some of the effort to anticipate climate change. My name is Aiza Tobing from Jakarta Research Council, and CityNet is the largest association or networking of urban stakeholders that committed to sustainable development in the Asia-Pacific region, established in 1987 with the support UNESCO, UNDP, and UN Habitat, where it has the member around 200 members, consists of 70% cities as local government, including Kuala Lumpur as an active member, and the other 30% consists of business, NGO, and professional. I'm here today to deliver to you about how planning and design of a city development is based on the mitigation or reduction of carbon emission. From the previous speaker, we heard about more detail. Now, allow me to deliver is more general as a planner. Start. My presentation will describe the following. Start from illustration of crisis wave related to the current situation and climate change. And background, the second is regarding why cities are important and priority mitigation. including challenges in the city as an impact of crisis, global agenda for sustainability and challenges to reach on sustainability, climate action strategy, the objective, and the last thing is planning and design models for climate mitigation itself, among others, think TOD development, green metropolis, green building, and circular economic model as a brief description. For this illustration, I think everyone can have our interpretation for this illustration. This illustration by Grandma Mikey, I think this is published last year. I think this illustration is good for describing the wave of crisis and what is happening since last year until now with the pandemic and its economic recession in all countries and the cities. And also the bigger the wave of the climate change crisis. And finally, we can see the wave of crisis biodiversity collapse. The crisis will be bigger. We can imagine with all this global crisis. So we have to do something effort with the low carbon society. This is the global challenge according to the World Bank. The city has and contribution in producing emission and getting a big impact. Here you can see 80% of the planet population, 80% of global GDP, 70 to 76% of world energy consumption, 80% CO2 emission will come from cities. Climate disaster could put 1.3 billion people at risk by 2050. If we not do nothing. And now we can see more than 70% of cities already feel the negative impact and more potential vulnerability of city to pandemic and infection disease. And this is here, we can see many local challenges are faced by cities, especially due to the impact of climate change, from the sea level rise, which cause drought or flooding, energy consumption, especially from fossil, traffic jam, emission, poverty, and etc. You can see here so many challenges in the city. For this reason, we can see here several efforts through consensus to implement the global agenda as a guide for the implementation and management of development in various countries, especially in this case in urban areas for sustainability, such SDGs to support the roadmap and platform of localizing SDGs through enhanced expertise and practices among urban stakeholders and connect a relevant partner for 2030 agenda. Climate change to ensure how cities can achieve the Paris Agreement aiming to limit global temperature increase to 1.5 Celsius, promoting climate mitigation and adaptation. This ongoing action will help to guide the cities to have to use the roadmap of climate action in innovation strategies. The other one, new urban agenda, to ensure city as vehicle of development are planned, developed, and managed in innovative and sustainable ways, and to develop the capacity of local authorities, leaders, and other local actors to implement all the global agenda with consistency. The other, we can see Sendal framework for disaster reduction and conservation and biodiversity, and other global agenda to look for the solution for the wave of crisis like we heard before. In CityNet, we have focus for networking cluster related to this agenda, including the climate change cluster, disaster, infrastructure, and SDGs cluster. We suggest and assist all the city members to have a roadmap of climate change for mitigation and adaptation. This is, however, to achieving a sustainability, as we can see in this prisma, to achieve a balance between equity, economy, ecology. Various conflicts are seen in determining development priorities, such conflict of centrifugation, conflict of green city conflict, and growth management conflict. This is, we have to look for the balance of it. This is one of the challenges to implement for sustainability, the agenda of sustainability. So based on the background that we have understood in the previous my description, the following problem question arise, which are the aim in obtaining answer as follows. How the city will adapt and increase resilience to the impact of climate change and its future impact with prediction at scenario. How to reduce greenhouse gas emission and build resilience to the impact of climate change through develop a roadmap toward greenhouse gas emission neutralized by 2050 and formulate emission reduction target for 2030. How to develop a plan and design that provides solution for the challenges and broad benefit for the community, environment, and economy throughout the city. And the last thing that's as my topic, how to develop method models of the planning and design for implementation greenhouse gas mitigation action plans, as well as climate change adaptation by involve all stakeholders and collaborating with various partners who are concerned with climate change. I think that is in low carbon society already. And this is a brief description of the climate change anticipation strategy that, as we have known well, mitigation approach is aimed to stabilize greenhouse gas concentration in the Earth's atmosphere, especially in the big cities. That approach encompasses a reduction in carbon dioxide production and increase the absorption of CO2. This is just a reminder. Adaptation approach is aimed to adapt the impact of change that occur by identifying and mapping which location and group communities are vulnerable to the impact of climate change. And this topic is related to the mitigation. Let I elaborate this. This mitigation can be done through three measures. First, production efficiency and efficient use of energy, including the development of alternative energy. Second, emission reduction both from the moving source, such transportation, and from the unmoving source like the industry and building. And the third is absorption, or carbon sinks and sequestration, which can be done with the expansion and improvement of the open space absorption function or other kinds of greenery. I think we heard since yesterday all the three strategies. Here we see various approaches of models that need to be direct towards reducing carbon emission. In this case, we'll give example: transportation system, greenery, waste management, circular economic, and green building retrofit. To achieve sustainable development priority is given to development of facilities, infrastructure, and activities that produce carbon as little as possible and absorb carbon as much as possible. In this case, especially for greenery, how to absorb carbon as much as possible. This is a sample of the model of TOD zone, development of TOD zone. This is designed through which in the zone 2 or 3 public or mass transit system pass by with the principle 1, develop neighborhood that promote walking. We heard it for the other previous speaker a lot. Prioritize non-motorized transport networking such cycle, bicycle, create dense network of street and paths is like connected, locate the development near high quality public transport is transit, increase mobility by regulating parking and road use, safe like modal system, and then plan for mixed use so mixed use, optimize density and trans capacity, density pay, and create region with short commuters. This is a principle of TOD zone. This is an example of the TOD zone design at Manggarai Station in central Jakarta, which has originally partly slum, currently under construction. We can see here, this is the they use mixed principle of mixed use, walk, density, compact, cycle, shift, transit, and connect. You can see that's more green. You can see in the zone area is around 500 to 700 meter distance. If you compare to the before pay attention to the climate action, the planning is like this, that will create more footprints and using private car. So using many private cars because there is no mixed use, there is no pedestrian, no in the bike path and so on. So this is already the revised. And for example, we can see this we can see that illustration. So from when existing condition, for working, they use a lot of car, and with TOD start to shift from using bike, using public transport, and just a small private car. And this is more success if you use instrument intervention. It's like regulation and policy, so they can more using. Also from school to business, total trip with the same 25 total trip. Traveling with private car will be 21, and with TOD is just 9, and with intervention of instrument will be just last 3. This is a description of how the importance of planning with consider the mitigation or low carbon design. This is the concept of green metropolis model. Here we can see how the principle of the green metropolis concept are an effort that is also expected to reduce emission, especially reducing footprint. Let's see the matrix. So the green metropolis concept is living smaller, the principle living smaller, living closer, and driving less. So this is with planning and city design with high density green building and high density green building and with the intensity with greenery, there will be increased open space and carbon absorb, and increasing of population access to green open space and access to affordable housing, of course, including for now on access to information. This is important during the pandemic and post-pandemic. And living closer. Living closer means we have to make it mixed use and compact and reduce travel trips, which will reduce emission, reducing footprint. This will be increasing population, access to workplace, shopping, social and public facilities, and place of daily needs, including access to information, and driving less. I think this is already talking a lot. Developing of TOD areas, including cross modes, transit, pedestrian, and bike paths. Reduce use of private vehicle and increase use mass transit, and increasing population access to bus stop, transit, public transportation, bicycle lanes, pedestrian, and paths. This is a such kind of model, green metropolis model. This is, I think, this concept of green is already familiar, and we heard it from previous speaker, where some principles are also required, especially for new buildings. Principle of efficient energy, water, material with waste, and green this is a building for next generation with environmental friendly. While for old buildings, it's our recommended is to retrofit building. You mentioned it, building retrofit. In Jakarta, it is prioritized now for public buildings. So we suggest all the public building using a building retrofit. The governor regulation regarding green building and retrofit already exists there. I think in the other city also as well. This is, I think I just, because I'm not the expert of economic, but this is a brief, I take it from source from Pedro Fernandez from Climate Change Technical Manager. This is the important things during the pandemics because we have now economic recession. So climate change and economic recession is combined to use economic circulation. This model is more suitable during on post-pandemic. Now, this is an economic concept whose fundamental principle is to keep resources withdrawn and coming from the environment in the economic circuit, therefore extending their life cycle and avoiding the return in the form of waste, increasing its effectiveness and efficiency, reducing unnecessary consumption and the need for excessive extraction of resources from nature. Focus on the existing measures, solution that promote circularity and the application of the various are, you can see here, from refuse, reform, reduce, reuse, and recycle. This is a circular economy considered in using for the waste. Promote a reduction in the effect of human activity on the environment without jeoparding the quality of life. So this is a principle of the circular economy. Acquisition of raw materials increase in the efficiency of extraction process and new business resulting from the circularity of product. For example, companies in the recycling business design and project the development of new alternative and innovative products and service with greater added value. Environment and climate change are top issue on the global agenda, and marketing increasingly promotes solutions that include the principle of circularity. The design state is not limited to material and product, but also applies to solution for production and service provision. And the last, production and retransformation. Increase process efficiency, reduce cost, and consequently increase margin and income through reduction of energy costs and raw material acquisition, increase efficiency in production process, and higher product added value. This is a example of the circular economy carried out by an industry using such remote communication technology, uses recycled product, energy efficient like before, use recycled materials, and renewable energy, increase the percentage of recycling in product, more efficient equipment, and with lower maintenance and cost. I think this is the example of the industry process of circular economy. So, of course, for the model, we want with implementation of the planning and design models that we can do optimal carbon emission reduction. If we back to the previous description, the background objectives and planning and design solution based on the mitigation approach, we expect the reduction of carbon emission will occur more than business as usual. This is the blue one is business as usual. However, the result will be even more optimal in the implementation in supported by various instrument policy, both through the government in collaboration with various stakeholders. So this is this is for example. So as business as usual, we can do nothing. That will be the carbon will be higher, and with TOD there will be, like before I described, will be more less. And then if we are talking from from blueprint or planning to implementation, we have to pay attention also for the strategy of implementation. So strategy in implementation related to the policy regulation and instrument are the important too. So if you make a such kind of the other instrument, the result will be more low, the carbon will be low. So we can, how it is important to pay attention for the instrument, the other instrument. So as a conclusion for to complete my presentation, there is a conclusion of my presentation. There are some strategy and model for climate models for climate mitigation, among other things, development of TOD, green building, green metropolis, circular economic, etc. Maybe there's the other. Planning and design models must consider climate change mitigation as an input for a new development paradigm, including post-pandemic. Among other things, change to infrastructure standards that are more ecological or friendly based, such environmental friendly based, minimum to maximum parking provision, pedestrian and bicycle path development as a network of transportation system. Acquisition of raw material, the design stage production, and transformation. Planning and city design instruments are based on CO2 mitigation or greenhouse gas mitigation and population access improvement, including access to information as an input for priority and policy and design selection. Model could be implemented and replicated up to scale and as prototype in other cities as well. And the last thing, if we are talking about from blueprint planning to implementation, we must pay more concern for the strategy of implementation. Strategy of the implementation related to the policy, regulation, and other instruments are important. Thank you. Terima kasih and thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aiza Tobing, for the interesting presentation. Participants, if you have any question, please raise in the Q&A box below and will be addressed during the panel discussion. Now, let's get some insight into the topic entitled Urban Environment and Greenery. May I now cordially invite Mr. Chan Kin Meng, Chairman of Real Estate and Housing Developers Association, Kuala Lumpur, as the moderator of the session. Over to you, Mr. Chan Kin Meng.
Thank you, Azira, for emceeing the event. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending the 2021 edition of the World Class Sustainable Cities Conference. I hope you've been, enlightened by all the sharing recently. Please join me to show your appreciation and thank our speakers for their insightful presentations. For this panel discussion, unfortunately, Mr. Andy Bow is unable to join us. However, we are very fortunate to have another distinguished commentator for this session. Please welcome, first of all, Dr. Aiza Tobing, who's the Deputy Secretary General of CityNet. Selamat siang, Doctor.
Selamat siang.
Okay, and we will be joined today by Town Planner Ahmad Jeffrey Clyde, who is a member of the Advisory Council of the Malaysian Institute of Planners and a director of the APUDG. Jeffrey has a Bachelor of Economics and a Master's of Urban and Regional Planning from the University of Queensland. He's a fellow of the Malaysian Institute of Planners and a registered member of the Board of Town Planners and a member of the Australian Planning Institute. Now, he has worked in the public sector in Australia and the private sector in Malaysia since the 1980s. His experience includes involvement in ongoing projects ranging from poverty alleviation and regional development plans, preparation of statutory plans such as the National Physical Plan 1 and the local area plans, as well as the preparation of townships and housing estates for the private sector. These projects have seen involvement in countries such as Australia, Vietnam, India, Dubai, Libya, Sudan, and Fiji. Jeffrey's notable involvement in notable Malaysian projects have included the Bandar Rimbayu by IJM in Bukit Jelutong, the Serenia City, Kota Elmina, and Elmina West for Sime Darby Properties, as well as Kota Kemuning, Bandar Botanic, Gamuda Gardens, and Gamuda Cove, Jade Homes, and the Horizon Hills for Gamuda, as well as the Nusa Jaya Johor for UEM Berhad. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Town Planner Ahmad Jeffrey Clyde and Dr. Aisa for the panel discussions. A quick reminder to all participants that your questions can be raised in the Q&A box, and I will pick this up for the panelists. Please ensure that you state your name and organization in the question box. So, yes, that was a very insightful sharing by Dr. Aisa. And yes, I think it resonates strongly that whatever the best laid plans are just perhaps a direction, but equally important is the emphasis on the strategy and how we get from A to B. Jeffrey, perhaps you could start us off with some commentary on what Dr. Aisa has shared recently.
Thank you. And I think I need to apologize. I'm a little bit of a small league player compared to Andy Bowe and the Foster's team. So I think there are a couple of things that come out of this, as you've just mentioned. One is, as we saw with Foster's presentation of plans, incidentally, there were two in that portfolio with Malaysia. So yes, we were there. And the principles there, again, were execution ones. And Doctor's points is very, very valid that it's all very nice to have plans, but it's got to have policy. And as all the other speakers have said over the last 2 days, you have to have implementation. And I think this is the biggest challenge that we are focusing on to me, in the Malaysian context, that policy is easy to write. Policy execution is another question altogether. And to some extent, going back to Andy's presentation where he talks of climate, and again, the whole theme of the discussion is about climate, that how do you manage it? And of course, what I saw in Foster presentation was the example of the Dubai building, which had a desert at 76 degrees to a house at 27 degrees. And in essence, it's achieved the human comfort level just through design. And I think it was interesting how the tools that are available to achieve that human comfort level, because that's the beginning of the low carbon process. The other speakers in the last 2 days also have mentioned, of course, carbon reduction through mobility issues. This, to me, is going to be, in terms of planning, and in the Malaysian context in particular, one of the real key challenges as we go into the next 20 years. Maybe Doctor could confirm, but I did hear that Indonesia is going to ban petrol-driven motorbikes by 2030. In essence, they're shifting to electric. This is a major, major impact. So these are issues which all come together. And I remember a discussion with Joseph Yu. He's a senior traffic engineer in Singapore quite some years ago now, who actually said, look, the Singapore transformation from the late 60s through to what it is now was not an accident. It was planned, it was designed. So they planned it, they detailed it, they built it, But the biggest issue that comes with this, and I think is the fundamental of the carbon reduction, is you have to believe it's going to happen. In our case, it may not more than belief, it's a case of must happen. Otherwise, we could potentially all be in trouble. And the recent floods, I think, in and around Kuala Lumpur here, are all part and parcel of this story.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Okay, I have a question from the audience from architect Haziron Hamid, and this is directed at Dr. Isa. Fairly broad. Okay, the question is going electric the answer to reduce carbon emissions? I presume this is for vehicles and such, but yes, Dr. Isa, perhaps you can comment on that.
Yes, since the electric, using electric now is some of our electric using. No, there's an alternative, so such kind of energy, renewable energy. So it's not electric, but at least using electric, like for transportation, is less emission compared to the using oil by gas using fossil. I think the more you using electric for the public transport, that I think the less of emission can be produced. That's the now how to, for this time, I think we have staging because this is more expensive for vehicle, but for the electric for the building, I think we can come to the other alternative energy like solar, like the other. So we have a campaign now to using like 1 million solar energy, something like that. So that's that using the electrical from electric company. Yes, I think if I mean my opinion.
Thank you, Dr. Isa. Yes, I do recall reading recently that the process of electrifying transportation is something that's been going on for I think several decades now, and it's definitely a growing trend. And more poignant is the fact that studies have shown that if they electrify the public transportation or even the logistics network, there is a larger amount of savings there on an infrastructural level than merely to push the agenda on private vehicle owners. So yes, I think again it goes back to what you mentioned about an all-encompassing strategy. Yeah. So yes, very good for that. We have another question from Joanna Abbas Rashid. Okay, thank you, Dr. Isa, for your informative presentation. What sort of incentives are there in Indonesia to encourage ordinary people to adopt a more low carbon lifestyle?
Yes, of course. We are now more of to encourage awareness of the low people or community to act like how to reducing the carbon. So every in his life, like for in the household, for community, especially in the dense kampung, it is dense. We make such kind of how to living with the how to using recycle, like I said, like circular economic for the waste, and also how to make a greenery, so to make medicine from so many. There is models for the dense the community to work with how to let's care concern with the climate change. Many community or NGO now start to decide green community, including is I think we set up low carbon society. So the members is this is important because this is from the community in the grassroots. So we have to set up low community and establish also like corporation, corporative. So they have a such kind of invest also from the herb medicine from the solid waste. It's like waste bank. That's a good one. Now we campaign about the waste bank to get money from the, if they can recycle collect the recycles waste, and then they get money return, and then they make cooperative, so everybody, so to make more. So this is the important start from the community. Now the important things, how government to encourage them, because they need also such kind of facility from them. So we start in Indonesia. In Indonesia, we campaign about the kampung climate, to use to campaign about the climate change action. So there is around 5 sites: solid waste and water efficiency, and so on. So we recognize also how to make us like solar energy from the small invest, and to make it awareness for the community.
Thank you, Dr. Isa. Jeffrey, any thoughts on that? I mean, you must have come across some localized examples in your time working in various countries. Yes, how any sort of innovative methods for incentivizing people to adopt a more low carbon lifestyle?
Well, I can tell you in Sudan, it was a case of absolute poverty, war-torn a lot. Literally, the people, if one looks at for example, your typical diagram of sustainability, the 3 circles, and how they overlap, and you have a little circle in the middle, or a shape in the middle, that's so-called sustainable. In their context, they were basically all 3 cycles overlap: economy, social, and economic. It was a mystery to me how they lived. Incidentally, you can find very sustainable communities like that in the highlands in Sarawak again, and of course we've still got our Orang Asli as well locally. That question of as I look at these things, the 3 circles, the economic, the social, and the environmental. The environment one has only recently come to the fore. Yes, it's been an issue for, we might almost say, way back in the 70s, 1970s, 80s. The environment started to appear as an issue. Of course, it's grown to be a significant issue. The policies that seek to drive these things, actually not that strong in any of the projects. I think in Libya, for example, our biggest problem climate-wise was dealing with the dust, which was like talcum from the Gibral winds, the seasonal winds. Of course, heat. Locally, of course, is climate in a day-to-day issue? Little. Yes, as planners, we find the request to orientate houses in a north-south direction. But when it comes down to climate, it is an orientation thing, supposedly on heat load, but very often on cultural grounds. And of course, this is, strangely enough, supported by a culture from further north, much further north, where the winds and the cold winds from the north, you turn your back to them, and so you're orientated in that direction. Similarly, in the Australian context, in the south, Melbourne and whatnot, you orientate to use the climate. So it is a smart people use this to fulfill their own objectives of creating comfort. And at the end of the day, I was just trying to take points from Andy's presentation and think through which ones are actually carried through. And of course, he talked of orientation, he talks of massing, he talks of material, he talks of breeze, he talks of ultimately trying to target human comfort. That is somewhere between 24, 27 degrees. If in the local context here, one said, let's target that as a requirement for planning approval, I don't believe there's such a provision exists at this point. So, but the market itself, people themselves, want to try and fulfill these targets. So there is a lot, I think, of the climate agenda has to be driven by people's basically self-interest, be it the market or their own personal self-interest.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Yes, indeed. I think to sum that up, my understanding is that a localized solution, is the one that works best, because obviously conditions differ depending on where you are. Good. Yes, thank you. We have several questions coming in. A gentle reminder to our participants, please do state your name and, if you can, the organizations you're coming from. Dr. Isa, there's another question, interesting one. What tools does Indonesia use to measure carbon emissions? And alongside that, what are the main challenges faced by Indonesia in monitoring and measuring the carbon emissions there?
Indonesia has already planned by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2050 also. Right? So there are measures. So I think there are experts to measure that by 20 will be reducing. Even though there are such kind of, you mean the method or?
Yes, I think the question was just asking about what tools, what methods perhaps, what methodology does Indonesia use to measure their carbon emissions? Yeah, if you're talking about Indonesian, I'm expert of cities, so Indonesian have the same with the other country. I think we can come from the method is measure from, I'm not the expert, but at least we have a target for 2030 and 2050 to, it's coming from, Indonesia is coming from forestry, but in the city is more from transportation and from energy. So the others, that's our concern, how to reduce the using the private car. So it's measured by the method from the becoming IPCC. I don't know, not exact, but it's we measure it how every planning is concerned about the how about to concern about the environmental. But as I know that sometimes my presentation is conflict of to achieve the target, sometimes between like before social, economic, and equity and yeah, that's a three. I think the target we have to consistent to achieve it. If there is a many conflict between the stakeholders, but how to make it balanced and then to more concern to the community, especially to unlucky community, especially how to make all the plan, all the development is concerned to low carbon development, but to measure it. So every years we have calculate the target to in the city like Jakarta. We have such monitor evaluate how many carbon already calculated so far to achieve 30% by 2030 and more than from the other sector, especially for transportation, from green, from waste. That's calculated every year. We have monitor it by, we have a institution to do special institution to do that measure, to measure the carbon reducing every year and to make it report to the, what we call that, Bappenas, to the central government. Every city has to report to the central government
achieve the carbon reducing every year. So far it's look like, especially during pandemic, because less mobility, I think that's more success. So you can keep it how to reducing the private car to make it such kind of success for reducing the carbon from transportation, especially, and then the second from waste, and also from the to much more greenery. That's it.
Thank you, Doctor. So yes, it's an ongoing process. It's under constant review, and obviously, it's specific in many ways to the communities of which these goals are set. So timely, we have a add-on question that is along this theme. This is by Nur Nabiha Nasli. Okay, it reads, thank you to both speakers. How are we going to convince the majority public to adopt low carbon initiatives, since these initiatives need a bigger or costlier investment? I mean, how can people afford this? Well, that's I think that's an interesting ask. Perhaps, Jeffrey, would you like to chime in on this?
Oh, this one, very, very important question. Because without a buy-in from the public, and the public, of course, is basically, get to the nitty-gritty, is you and me. So that this question is what we, you and me, actually doing to try and address this carbon issue. Have you given up your car? Nope. Have you given up your waste separation? Not really. So there is a major, major challenge here to move basically the mentality of people to a new paradigm. In the context here, of course, climate and humidity, heat and humidity have been brought up several times as to why people will not use a bicycle, for example. Oh, it's too hot. Everywhere else is cold. This is the beginning of it, of course. Do you hop on the bike first when there are no facilities, or do you have the facilities first? So this is where I think the agenda that Doctor's been talking about, there has to be a vision, overall vision, there has to be action. And little things come to my mind in this one. For example, is a footpath seen to be a piece of infrastructure in the road arrangement, or is it a piece of landscape? At the moment, it is viewed as landscape. Now, until you've got the footpath, you won't get the walking. You then have trouble getting people onto bikes. So there's a chicken and egg thing here, which I believe somewhat the Foster's presentation was talking about, that you've got to understand climate and then work with it. I think to get people to understand this, to some extent, they have to be more aware that climate is not the enemy. It is something to work with, and using the tools that we've just mentioned. I don't think at the end of the day, they will cost a lot. It'll cost somebody something. But if we take electricity, for example, solar panels, TNB have actually already alerted people that if your bill is around $600 a month, which is a fairly big bill, it is worthwhile for you to switch to solar. Now, of course, if the solar panel cost can be reduced, that this switch could be at $300 a month, then you will switch. In essence, your decision will be economic and it will be self-promoting. And I think this, to me, is try and answer the question in a way that the costs related to climate change impacts need to be personalized, and then from there one will get change in behavior.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Yes, no, I think that really hits home, because it's all the it makes sense if there's dollars involved. And a thought just came to mind to paraphrase the saying: you can drag the cow to the water, but in this modern context, I think the cow is probably contributing to more CO2 and methane. So not Yes, thank you. Thank you to Dr. Nur Shuhada Muhammad for her comments and question. I'll read it out. This is directed to, I think, Dr. Isa. Now, it reads, taking Japan as an example, the efforts towards climate mitigation and carbon emission initiatives are well embedded in the community and the practice of their daily lifestyles. This is thanks to their well-refined education system. The question is, to what extent does the effort towards climate mitigation and carbon emission is being taken seriously by the government and the whole community for some countries, including Malaysia? This value has been less taught in the schools. So yes, an interesting question about educating society. Dr. Isa, any comments perhaps?
Yes, I think as I told before, we assist all the city. Yeah, of course, Indonesia. I'm representative of the city of a member city. We encourage have the roadmap for mitigation as well as adaptation. So for mitigation, we have a planning, including to educate them, including for to make them aware about how important the action of mitigation action. So, for example, we make in the school such kind how to, if you change the bolam, something like that, and we teach them about it's a small scale tools how to get the light from the solar energy, something like that. So we pay attention. That's also in education, and I think in the curriculum also about the climate change. So we pay attention to educate the people, especially in the community, beside the government, guide them. That's the planning from the other sector, from waste, from electric, from energy. So from how the importance of green space, how every trees can absorb, how many they can absorb and what kind of trees can more absorb the energy, the carbon, something like that. So we educate the people, make a campaign. You can see now how in the television, local television, every time, I think it's the other country in the other city also campaign about the climate change, and then campaign about economic circular, campaign about recycle waste, something like that. So government effort is to make guidance to minimize, and also how to collaborate. I think business is the important things. Business, so now they have that kind of incentive to using like recycle plastic bags, something like that. There are many policy to encourage, including, like I said, there are green building, they make incentive to encourage them, and also to make a such kind of water absorb, something like that. They put the incentive, we start incentive for the people who use concern about the climate change. For example, now we start to thinking about to make such kind of housing using the solar energy. They can get incentive, something like that, so they can get minimize the tariff tagihan listrik, so they minimize that. So the important things like green building, they can get the free of charge, something like that. So the important thing from the government guidance and give them incentive rather than punishment. So it's some kind of action can be mandatory, voluntary, but some should be mandatory. So for the community is we push it for voluntary, but there are some regulation is important. That I said there are a lot of planning and also guidance design, but how to implement that is important thing. To implement that's important guidance that prepared by the government, and also regulation and other instruments to do that. The important thing is how to give the incentive for the people, for the community who concerned about who implement the action or the facilities for low carbon. So especially for low carbon society. I think now so many NGO coming from for green NGO, green community NGO. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Aisha. Yes, I agree. I mean, I do remember as far back as 2009, when the first of the WCSC series had started. In those days, people were decrying the move to build more green and sustainable buildings because of the upfront cost factor. But look, I mean, over time, with more experience and knowledge and data coming back, people are beginning to see the long-term benefits. And, you know, I think that helps weigh in on the overall decision. We have another question from Martin Lee of CLO Architects. And this one is directed to Jeffrey. Okay, it reads, as professionals, we work with most private developers. Can you give some built examples of how we can introduce sustainable design features in township developments and building designs that our developer clients would be happy to implement? Okay, an interesting one, Jeffrey. We have an architect asking a planner how to, you know, get that sorted. So let's hear that.
Who's talking to a developer? Yes, the good question. And of course, as we all know, the developers are our clients. They're the people who pay us to produce the products which the community buy. And of course, at the end of the day, if they cannot be sold, then they have no value. And I think some of the issues that we're talking about in terms of climate response, the developers are responding to the needs of the community in various ways. If one looks back 20, 25, 30, well, 40 years back, the townships were quite different. The open space was minimal, road space minimal. One delivered a house. What we see today are developers trying to deliver an environment, community environment, much more, but one that also has within it climate responsive issues. And the classic one would be the retention pond requirement now that post-development discharge will be the same as pre-development, meaning water has to be held on site. And as Dr. Aisha's little drawing had there, a little tank showing rainwater being held. Now, of course, how much a little tank like that would hold in a Malaysian storm will fill up very fast, but that's beside the point. It's the principle of holding water before discharge, which of course in turn mitigates flooding, which we are now struggling to solve. So, it's one thing to provide a retention pond as a technical engineered facility. It's another to turn that pond into a park that becomes a community asset with the greenery and so on. This is where the challenges of administration come to some extent, my turf, your turf. And there needs to be more cooperation and big picture view rather than silo mentality to issues like that. I think when it comes to the buildings themselves, yes, there's green building index provisions now. There's another round of ESG now that if you wish to sell to the corporate component, these are becoming an issue that you don't get finance unless you can demonstrate some ESG compliance. So there's a series of provisions that are coming in. The issue, I think, to make an impact, whether they come coordinated in a complementary manner, the value can be greatly enhanced. But if they come in little dribs and drabs, then everyone doesn't quite see the value. But at the end of the day, I think, and we're watching this in the projects now, climate responsive solutions are being demanded from the market. And we're watching this with tree planting programs in our MENA projects, certainly trying to use good design, good materials, all part and parcel of it. and as I think I just mentioned, at the end of the day, it makes economic sense that you can move your products when you incorporate these elements. And of course, the smart developers will work out how to do that in a manner that achieves both objectives. You make some money, the buyer has a good, nice, environmentally compatible building.
That's absolutely true, Jeffrey. I mean, I think that really resonates with developers, because at the end of the day, we have to build houses and homes that are relevant. So, ultimately, it's what the public would want. And very interesting. You mentioned about repurposing or some of the designs. I do recall a very insightful visit I made to a solid waste treatment plant in the Pantai area. It's just off the new Pantai Expressway. Originally built as an open oxidization pond covering some 16 acres many decades ago. But the DBKL and the government had incorporated modern technologies, I think anaerobic breakdown technology. So they managed to reduce the need for the space down to, I think, about 4 acres. So that's 75% reduction in the open pond. And they've even managed to have that submerged below ground. So 75% reduction, but also nearly doubling the capacity from the site. And once they've covered up the 16 acres, they've now created a public park that tremendously benefits the community in the area. Wonderful stuff. Okay, thanks to that. So we have another question from Anna Kashfi to Jeffrey again. Now, design helps in reducing emissions and climate change, such as through block arrangements, orientations, and height control. As an experienced town planner and designer, what is the most challenging thing by far you have encountered in delivering good, sustainable design? Can you share your thoughts on the urban design and carbon emissions?
Urban design, I think the earlier speaker today brought up one of the odd issues about urban design and, of course, town planning provisions and compliance. And that is the affordable housing that has been being delivered fundamentally in high-rise development in the context where the neighbouring development, in essence, let's split it down into the affordables by price control, and the non-affordables, or so-called free market, is next door at a completely different type of development. To me, I personally see this as a point of concern, that this is social stigmatization, that one group are seen to be in that type of building and the other people live in another type of environment. And I can recall many times, you will put the low cost in the worst spot that you can possibly find because they're low cost. This is disappointing. But again, there's a question of access to housing, but other models besides moving to high-rise, particularly now that some of these high-rise have moved from walk up to 12, 15, even 18 stories. This is not cheap housing to maintain. So there's quite complex issues here to get through. But from an urban design, city planning point of view, yes, this to me is a long-term challenge on perceptions and community perceptions as we move forward. How does this come into carbon? Good question. The MRT CEO, Dr. Fazi, was last Friday, gave a talk that the MRT stations should now become community centres. So basically, that's what he was trying to propose. That now, this would then suggest that along those lines, and he's talking now of a major total urban solution, will become a series of destinations. The station will become important, which is how the stations grew in the old days when people didn't have cars. You would walk to the tram, 300-400 meters and you rode your tram into town, or you walked to the train. Of course, motor cars came and changed that whole pattern. So what he was suggesting is that we should try to reinvent the station as a community centre, a TOD type development. Now, that then has to be complemented, of course, with all the car parking controls and induce people out of their car through pricing. In other words, if you even want to park your car either in the city, mind you, in the big cities now, unless you've got special privileges, you will not park your car in the city. It's just too expensive. You will automatically drive yourself or walk to the train and work from there. So I think the carbon emission element is all got to be linked to mobility, simplistically. And then the mobility solutions, which of course are not about car, they're about all sorts of mobility, from walking, cycle, public transport. And as we move forward, and this is where I think the big changes are going to come fast through some of the new townships being developed with electric on-demand cars. That again, we come back to the cost. Why do you buy a car when you use it for maybe 1 hour a day, and for the rest of the 23 hours, it's depreciating to the point that it's not actually smart to own a car. And I think the market has to, the car industry, with the arrival of electric cars, which are much theoretically at this point makes more expensive, but will become much cheaper, that purchasing a car will be a new experience and done in a different way. So I think once we take motor cars off the road, then that's going to have, I think the numbers show it will have a significant impact on carbon. And this has been shown in the COVID climate, that the environment has gone up in quality just for the fact that we're all in lockdown. So there's the proof. Now it's just how do we get to take those cars off the road that fundamentally, and this is the ultimate challenge, still meet people's desire for personal mobility. That is the big challenge.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Yes, I recall, I think it was over a decade ago, we had Hong Kong, the government of Hong Kong come over and share their experiences. And they had some of the, the most punitive taxes for owning combustion engine vehicles, because they wanted to get rid of congestion and the pollution. But then came about Tesla cars, and they had, part of their plan, massive green tax incentives for owning an electric vehicle. And suddenly the streets of Hong Kong were congested again, because everyone swapped from owning, petrol engine cars to Teslas, and congestion was back again. So, yeah, it's a wider context thing. And as you said, the cost of owning the car in a bigger picture of the savings is something we have to take in consideration. Dr. Aisa, sorry, I noticed you had raised a hand. Sorry, please feel free to add to that. Oh, okay. And anyway, okay, I think we have about 3 more minutes. Sorry, Jeffrey, what was that?
Doctor's muted.
Or perhaps, she's gone past that.
Okay. No.
Yeah. So, okay.
Dr. Aisa, do you have anything to add to the last question? Yep.
Yeah, so I think one for all the question is, one of the goal of the what to minimize to carbon, to reducing carbon, is to be sustainability. So the lower carbon in the city, the more sustainability of the city. Who is more to do that? I think it's local community, like how to encourage them to be involved. I believe with Jeff. I agree with Jeffrey. So beside the design building, and that's it, the community, the social community, to prepare the community is important. So how to community, to encourage community will be involved, and we have to train them and enhance and put them to sense of belonging to the such kind of project like TOD development. They can involve them and give them awareness of the importance, such kind, how important efficiency to walk and to cycle, and to give them such explanation, and how to the important of renewable energy, and all of them for sustainability for the next generation, for the our generation, to make a such environment friendly. So that's important things. I believe that's not just planning and design of the physical or economic, but we have to prepare the community or the social to awareness and to show them how the important sustainability. For example, like I said that in Indonesia, we set up several low carbon society. Then we formed that with cooperation institution. The cooperation institution is such kind of business entities that have member of the community based on cooperative principle, as well as people economic movement based on principle of family. So that's our strategy for community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Aisa. Just a quick reminder, I think we've got about 5 minutes or so in this session, and we'll try and field as many questions as we can. And thank you to the audience. You've all been very curious, and there's lots more coming through. Here's a question from Tan Yok Kun. Okay, are there any objective or concrete statistical measurements on the achievement of low carbon emissions based on population density and the existing environment conditions? Perhaps, is that something, Dr. Aisa, you could chime in on?
I think there are some kind of measurement. Is population is the kind you can using a population, because there are measure about population per capita, about how they produce the density of the population, how they produce the carbon. So there is a calculation about that, the more how many population per carbon. So we can show in the Jakarta how many population per year, and compare to the Kuala Lumpur, compare to the other city. I think they can using the population as a indicator with carbon, population per carbon as indicator.
I might just add that would be just using people per acre or units per acre in itself would not necessarily give you the right answer. You go to Japan, you've got very, very high density, but again, in the context of the urban environment there, you have very few cars. So your carbon footprint, because cars are one of the biggest contributors in the normal expectation of measuring carbon. So the more cars that disappear, the better the environment. But of course, you can then make high density, as like you just mentioned, Hong Kong, that you can improve the quality of the air, but it's not necessarily directly linked to density.
Okay, again, it's a question of context. Great, wider thinking. Okay, a question from Christopher Lee, and I think this one is probably one that resonates with everyone around the world in the last 2 years. How does carbon neutral goal impact on the use of current internal combustion airplane engines? Will they be electric or hydrogen generator engines? So far, he's heard a lot about electric operated vehicles, but he has not heard much about the future of the airplane engine. So of course, you know, I think we all have to try and stretch our minds back to the last time we all got an airplane, and it's an interesting pause to look at you know, changing that mode of transport. I think an open question. Anyone has any thoughts about, you know, airplane engines?
Well, you can. There's already been an aeroplane fly around the world with solar panels, no engines. So whether I'd like to hop on that aeroplane, I'm not so sure. Personally, it's say in the tropical context, one good rainstorm, no power. But electric aeroplane engines are already being tested. So no big deal to move to hydrogen as well. So a move away from combustion engine is already technology that's in place.
Good.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, Dr. Isa, yes.
Yes, as I know, there is such kind of award for airline company who is using some kind of technology and using the energy low carbon. There is an award every, I don't know, evaluate all the airline too. This is the action of low carbon also.
Yes, I think you know, technology has the ability to be a game changer, as they say, and moves very fast. So perhaps it's only a matter of time. You know, it's what it is. Okay, I think we have time for just one last question, and this comes from Dr. Nur Shahada. Carbon footprint from tourism activities is among the issues faced by all countries. As tourism takes place, you know, within the community, it is crucial for planners to look into this matter. Could any of the panelists suggest or give examples of any efforts that can be done from the planning and design perspective to overcome these issues? Okay, so tourism.
I think I'll let Dr. Aisha have a go.
Yes, I think there's the popular now for the tourists, for the itineraries. All you can see all the element of the tourism. The place is should be considering about the environment, like in the hotel. All that green hotels, like using the such kind of seat, so you have to not draw laundry every day, something. And then the also so more green. I think this is campaign of the tourism now, and then is, as you talk, it's not just for the business, for the owner of the tourism, but also for the tourism itself. So they have to prepare what they have to do and what they can do. I think even since start in the public transport, in the airplane, in the bus, we can show the such kind of brochure and see how to using the, if you could reach the tourism place. So this is the I think the important things, the regulation, especially in the Watch Beach and in the north area for tourism. This is the important thing to sustain about the water and something like that. And then also because should keep it as a natural as much as we can do. So not build as the design is. So prepare it and keep it as using the environment pay attention to the environment more. Rather than build everything, riding the profit, rather than get the profit.
Thank you, Dr. Aisha. And I think, you know, that's a very important point you raised there. It's part of the whole educating process where, you know, perhaps lots of notable efforts are being made all around the industry and communities, but we need to amplify that. We need to, you know, make sure that is placed in the forefront of people's awareness, because if you have a good idea and nobody's aware of it, you know, it's a lost opportunity. So, okay, with that, you know, I think we will close the panel session. Thank you very much to our two panelists, Dr. Aisha and Jeffrey. Thank you to the participants for all your lively questions and you know, for being so engaged. In closing, I look forward to the time where we can choose to consciously opt for ecotourism in wonderful places that preserve nature, like Dr. Aisha mentioned. And I'll take up Jeffrey's suggestion to fly by solar plane, perhaps departing by night. Thank you very much. And yes, a round of applause. I'd like to hand the session back to the MC. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chan King Meng. Conference delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we have an exciting news. 5 copies of books entitled Banda Mesra by Yan Gale will be yours if you participate to answer the question related to the conference. There will be 5 questions. The first to answer correctly will be eligible to receive a copy. The question will be posted after the way forward session. The successful winner will be announced before the end of WCSC today. Stay tuned until the end of the conference session. We will be break for lunch and prayer. We will be meet here again at 1:50 p.m. for us to continue the afternoon session of WCSC 2021 using the same link. Thank you. Hope to see you all in the next session.